every time there's an oil spill, every time there's some big controversy with an oil company or any company, just a couple years later, you see them back being like, hey, we care.
We fucked up there.
Here's a new logo. We fucked up, but look, we redesigned our logo.
Have you seen it? We're a whole new company.
Yeah, we really changed. It's like your shitty ex. Like, come on, baby, I've changed.
I promise this time. I mean it.
I promise this time it's gonna be different, baby. Come back.
Jesus Christ.
But it's true. Content notices for this episode include mentions of climate change and environmental racism. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rule 63 podcast. My name is Anna Marie. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
My name is Danny. I use he, series, and they, series pronouns.
And today we're going to talk about gender reveal parties.
And how they're going to end the world.
How they're definitely wrecking havoc in more than one way.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable.
So if you haven't heard the news that was circulating, in the queer circles in the past couple of days, there was news of a gender reveal party. This is terrible, but I can't help but laugh. It's such a surreal scenario. There was a gender reveal party that went haywire. Basically, it took place in California or around California, and some sort of pyrotechnic device that was supposed to explode and reveal the color that would result in the gender of the baby being born. That spark resulted in a massive series of wildfires throughout California because of the increasingly dry state that the state is in.
Yeah.
So that sucks.
And this is also the second time gender has attempted to set the world aflame.
Yes, the exact same story happened almost 2 years ago, almost to the day or almost to the month, in 2018.
Hubris of cis people.
And no, these cis people didn't intend to burn a forest down for gender, but my goodness.
Gender reveal parties are stupid to begin with, and then they burned a forest down.
Let's talk about it. For the completely uninitiated, for the average person who has no idea what the harm could be in gender reveal parties, what in your own words is the problem with them?
The fact of having a gender reveal party reveals an investment in gender that is going to traumatize your kid if they turn out trans.
Yeah, basically that. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's like if we lived in a world where it's oh, you're trans, oh, you're non-binary, oh, cool, sure. New name, new pronouns, cool, got it. But because we live in a world where the gender of your child dictates so much about how you move throughout the world, the result is parents get all hyped up about the gender of their kid. Yeah. And by gender, we of course mean the biological sex.
Yeah, because when you're looking at a baby in utero, you have not discovered their gender identity.
Right. It's a very important distinction between sex and gender.
So you're having a my baby has a penis party, which is bizarre.
Vagina party.
We love that.
Yeah. And that doesn't even go into the fact that biological sex is not even binary. And all the many, many parents out there who may find out that their kid is going to be born intersex or has been born intersex.
And then get told horror stories by doctors that aren't accurate.
And then, have their kids go through surgery that they didn't consent to change their bodies. The havoc wreaked on the lives of intersex and trans kids because of the gender binary is fucking terrible. And that's its own thing.
And then
that's not even the full story.
On fire.
And then they set the forest on fire, which is just insane.
Yeah. And if you've been paying attention, you'll know that wildfires have been getting worse every year, regardless.
Mm-hmm. Kind of the anti-climate change talking point is kind of like, oh, California always had wildfires, but yes, they did. But that's not really accurate.
Because they're
it's
worse.
Because they're getting progressively worse and wreaking increasingly bad amounts of havoc on the residents.
You really love
the
phrase "wreaking havoc" today.
I know. I don't know why I keep saying that. Maybe I just feel like wreaking havoc.
Maybe.
Is the title of this episode is going to be "Wreaking Havoc"?
Maybe.
Wreaking havoc. But yeah, the point is like another fun fact about forest fires that I learned semi recently is that
so only you can prevent them.
Only you can, well, okay. So there are actually ways to do pre-prescribed burnings of forests so that they don't get out of hand. So a way that indigenous people actually controlled the overgrowth of forests so that, if a forest fire did happen, it didn't completely destroy the landscape, is they would do sort of pre-prescribed burnings of the forest. That would actually be good for the land and be good for the critters that live there.
Yeah. Because one thing you'll know about forest fires, like, if you look into them a little bit more, is that, like, they are a part of the ecosystem and, like, the cycle of everything. Mm-hmm. Is, like, stuff burns, space is made, like, dead shit turns into fuel for new shit, and, like, so there are, like, quote unquote supposed to be some fires, like, this is what the it's adapted to at this point, but
where we're at right now is because we haven't lived in sort of reciprocity with the land, and we've just kind of been polluting so much. The atmosphere in the land and the atmosphere in California has become increasingly drier, which has resulted in uncontrollable burnings.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the passage now, but I just finished reading an amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is all about indigenous scientific knowledge and all that stuff, and boy, was it life-changing. And they do talk about, at some point, the forest fire burning process and why, like, biochemically it is actually good to have these pre-prescribed burnings. And of course, nowadays, like, the fire experts do know that you are supposed to do this, and they have done this for a few years. But they could have just listened to indigenous people and found that out.
Yeah.
They had to, like, I don't know the history of how they found that out. But
that scholars do literally all the time with everything, always, where the people who are involved in something or will literally tell you the answer.
Yes.
And then big smart white man is like, oh, silly, whatever. That can't possibly be real. We have to find out the real answer. And then 20 years later, you find out, guess what, you dumb piece of shit.
We're really challenging academia as an institution of knowledge here, aren't we? Dumb piece of shit.
Yeah.
I can't find the passage.
Just trying to stall while you look for the quote.
No, it's fine. I can't find the passage. I thought I bookmarked it, but it's fine. It's almost like I should have prepared. But go buy Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and that's an excellent first foray into indigenous knowledge, which is very important, especially if you want to get into climate activism. So yes, believe people, and all that stuff. For the rest of the episode, we were just going to talk about environmental activism and climate activism and the sort of right and wrong approaches to take towards that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that people get wrong about environmental activism.
And I think one thing with the California wildfires that might lead us into some of the topics we wanted to bring up is that besides the gender reveal party, another contributing factor is the active neglect of like electrical equipment. By should have looked this up. Large corporation that handles power in California. Knowingly ignoring issues that they know can cause these fires. So, like, on one hand, like, it's kind of funny to make fun of these cis people who keep doing dumb shit. And gender reveal parties are bad, so we like to point it out. But on the other hand, like, a couple did not start the fires in California.
Right, it's the responsibility of corporations, too.
Yeah.
It's very easy to blame sort of individual humans for environmental devastation. Especially in cases like this, where it's like literally you can trace this forest fire back to an individual making a decision. But for the vast majority, and we love stories like that. We love stories that are like, oh yeah, there's a turtle choking on a piece of plastic. And yes, if one individual person did not properly dispose of that can ring thing, then that turtle would not be choking. And we love stories like that, but we're not paying attention to details like why are these electronics in the forest? Why are people's trash being dumped where turtles are? And that is the fault of big corporations. Right. There's a... Yeah, you were going to say something?
Because if you look at it on an individual level, like, sure, you can not throw that one thing away or, like, cut all of your little plastic rings, whatever, so that when they end up polluting the ocean, they don't murder the turtles. But there's a limit to how much an individual can do, and one of the, refrains that ends up as the response to that is like, but if we all get together, but that's bullshit too. Like, which is not to say that you shouldn't, like, be putting effort into, like, certain things like recycling and, like, whatever. Because you should do things that are good for the environment, and it is, in fact, good. And, like, saving one turtle's life is worthwhile, or whatever. But even if we all got together and, like, did this, if you look at, like, the output of shit that, like, individuals are putting out there and the output that corporations are putting out there, we literally cannot remove ours enough, like, to looking at all of the data and calculations everybody has done, like, we cannot fix things as individuals enough, literally, to halt or slow the issue.
Yeah.
While corporations are still just doing what they want.
Absolutely. Some figures that I have just, like, saved, internally burned into my brain, is that 80% of carbon emissions come from, like, large corporations and other, like, big pollutant centers. And even if you look at that section that is the contribution of individual people and their choices, as far as that is physically measurable, because we can go into that too, the quote-unquote carbon footprint, even in that small section of individual contributions, is like also 80 to 90% by the top 1% of earners in the world. So the billionaires and millionaires, and their lavish lifestyles, large properties, private jets, all that sort of thing. So if we, the working class, all band together and chose to recycle or whatever, which we should ostensibly do. We should always try to, reduce, reuse, recycle. That is a good practice, but that is not alone sufficient without advocating for real change and executing billionaires.
And killing Jeff Bezos.
Killing Jeff Bezos. And yeah, that's kind of my ultimate piece. You can make meaningful change at the political level, particularly at the local level. There's an amazing podcast called Black and Breathless, which we can link in the episode description. It's a whole podcast series about environmental justice by a bunch of Black students and activists, whose perspective is really valuable here. And they point out that an individual choosing to recycle has, yes, some impact, or an individual choosing to compost has an impact. But if you can get like your whole neighborhood or your whole community on board, and not just and get them to start recycling and composting and choosing these greener methods, that actually is more likely to result in communities coming together and advocating for legal change at the local level. Because having that community mindset gets people thinking, hey, we should change the books on this issue. We can put it in the law that all neighborhoods have to have some sort of composting center or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you're just like siloed off as an individual, that's not really as valuable as if you're, talking to your neighbors and reaching out to members of your local community.
Yeah. And getting those sorts of systems in place is good. And then also using that energy to direct at changes that are not about like community and are about corporate regulation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easier to get people on board with that kind of stuff once you've got some more cognizance of issues at hand as well.
Yeah.
And some sense of community built up.
I actually have some good news if you happen to be in Connecticut's 2nd congressional district.
Ooh.
There's a trans elder named Cassandra Martineau running for state Congress, and this Connecticut 2nd district running on a platform of single payer healthcare, environmental justice, carbon tax, and other amazing things, and trans advocacy, which are all freaking awesome, and you can go support her. She's running in the Green Party, so,
Woo, third party.
Woo, third party, I guess. Well, at the local level, it's entirely possible if we all band together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's that. We can also go into the very idea of a carbon footprint being kind of a lie.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big piece of this all as well. I know we just told you that the carbon footprint is a thing that can be measured and matters, but There's
obvious things associated with it that are having an impact. However, as it turns out,
if you're not familiar with the history of the idea of a carbon footprint, it's very much rooted in what oil companies want you to believe. So yes, there is some tangible, in theory, some sort of tangible number that you can associate with your actions, choosing to recycle, going vegetarian or whatever, and making different purchasing habits, owning land, etc. You may even remember trying to calculate your personal carbon footprint at one point. That's something that we did in fucking public school for an activity one day. But all you need to know about the carbon footprint is that it was actually invented as an idea by BP Oil.
Remember those guys?
Remember those guys from the oil spill? They actually came up with the idea of a carbon footprint and a carbon footprint calculator for the public to use to try to educate themselves about their individual contributions to climate change, as a very intentional way to offset responsibility from themselves to being an oil company and dumping plastic and other, emissions everywhere else on the planet.
It makes me think of those fucking ExxonMobil commercials that have been going out that are like, we care about the community. I saw somebody say something that was like, the evilness of corporation is like directly inversely proportional to how like happy and loving their Super Bowl ad tries to be.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great law to follow.
It's like there's a reason all the oil companies put out these weird, like, we're hiring the best in tech because we also care about the environment. Like fucking commercials, and it's because they're lies.
It's because they're usually fucking lies. every time there's an oil spill, every time there's some big controversy with an oil company or any company, just a couple years later, you see them back being like, hey, we care.
We fucked up there.
Here's a new logo. We fucked up, but look, we redesigned our logo.
Have you seen it? We're a whole new company.
Yeah, we really changed. It's like your shitty ex. Like, come on, baby, I've changed.
I promise this time. I mean it.
I promise this time it's going to be different, baby. Come back.
Jesus Christ.
But it's true. Oh, Lord. So, yeah. That was very impactful for me to learn. We'll link a Mashable article about that in the episode description for you to read all about it and the fucked up history of how companies have used ad campaigns like the idea of a carbon footprint to further their fucking agenda. And that doesn't even go into the fact that science as an institution kind of backed up this idea. And when BP came up with this idea and started publishing its own studies on it, the public imagination took hold and science kept going from there. And people not even associated with BP oil started pumping out studies and real academic papers on individual carbon footprint. And by individual, I mean like stuff that a person chooses to do with their individual actions.
A really appealing idea that you can, one, get a number to hold on to and understand, like, okay, instead of like this whole list of things, like I know it is here and I know that I can make it come down here.
Yeah.
And it's nice to imagine that we can all just do that. And I'm sure that at least some of the like academics who were working off of that idea after it was established, like, were like thinking this was actually a great idea, weren't just like eating up the BP oil propaganda. But, you know, it's important to remember, one, that like our brains want to hold on to really simple things more easily. And usually issues are not that simple. And that's part of why, too, it's easier to have, like, a villain, like that couple, who are individuals and you can understand, like, as people to blame. Whereas a corporation doesn't... blaming a corporation doesn't feel as much like you've assigned blame anywhere, and then you feel like you're doing nothing with the desire to assign blame, and it's unsatisfying. And the other thing is that they're just really good at lying, and they do it all the time. Like,
and you're not immune to propaganda.
One thing that I've been thinking of kind of associated with this, just because I think it's a thing a lot of people know by now, is like it's kind of tangential, but like the whole McDonald's lawsuit thing with the coffee lady.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, because McDonald's has a shitload of money, pumped information into the news media to convince everybody that it was just like this stupid fucking lady doing frivolous lawsuits, when they knowingly burned the shit out of her because they kept their coffee too hot even after they injured multiple people. Like, and by too hot, like boiling.
Yeah.
But it's easier to say, oh, that lady is a crazy person, and like people are just stupid, and corporations have the power to put a lot of information out in subtle ways where they sound like they're coming from real sources, like the news, and like not just like shitty ass Fox News, just like the news in general. And they're really good at coming up with stories that are appealing. And so when they don't want to take blame, they figure out somewhere else to put it. And it's on people, and it's on individuals, and it's never on them.
It's never on systems of oppression. It's never on systems,
Exactly.
period, and it's never on big companies that control a narrative. It sounds pretty tinfoil hatty to be like, they're controlling the media, man. But it's honestly the truth, and you can honestly look it up. And we can include, I think Adam Ruins Everything did an episode on that if you're really curious
Which is
to know
probably
more.
why a decent amount of people know about it now.
Yeah. The reason your coffee cup says caution hot is because of that lawsuit. And because of McDonald's fucking over someone really bad. Yeah, you brought up another great point about what individuals can do, and a lot of people try to they get the idea of a carbon footprint in their head, and they think, okay, I'm going to live this minimalist lifestyle. I'm going to minimize that number as much as I can by myself. And instead of thinking at the sort of community level that we talked about before, they kind of optimize their life and try to make all the best decisions, all the best, use of land decisions, all the best purchasing decisions. And
which is something it's very easy to market to.
It is very fucking easy to market to. Like, look, at this product is better for the environment, quote unquote. When there's not necessarily a big good standard for that, considering the intersecting issues of, like, if you're buying your quinoa from overseas, what about the transportation it took to ship it overseas? Or what about the exploitation?
The farmers who can't afford their own food anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The environmental issues are inextricably tied to all sorts of issues, worker abuse, animal abuse, and all that sort of thing. And it's a matter of, A, what do individual people have access to, and B, what's the real impact of your personal decisions? And that can be hard to trace. Sometimes it's kind of balance between two evils, and it's up to the individual to try to do their best in making those decisions.
Yeah, and one of the things that ends up happening too is that, like, we hear all the time that the world is fucking ending,
mm-hmm.
and then we get the messages that this is an individual issue and that, like, we have to change our personal lives, but we're also then overworked and super stressed out. So it's like, oh God, how do I do that? And then you latch on to easier and simpler things, and you don't do deep research. So when you hear, like, oh, if I, like, eat these things, if I buy from this place, like, that's going to be environmentally friendly, and then you don't look any further into it. Whereas, like, the environmentally friendly thing isn't to, like, buy health food. Health food has just gotten associated with environmentalism.
Mm-hmm.
The environmentally healthy thing is to buy local food, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But and people are becoming more aware of that, but only because that's kind of gotten marketed on its own.
It's local, it's organic.
Exactly. And just also a note, natural is not a regulated term, and companies can use it indiscriminately in marketing their food. Mm-hmm. Organic is a regulated term, but it's very specifically regulated, so some things that are not marked organic are not, like, weirdly bad in any way. They mm-hmm. just don't fit that really specific definition.
Yeah, totally.
But so when you don't have time to do this kind of research, because capitalism is sucking your soul out of you, like, it's way easier to get tricked into doing things that aren't benefiting anyone but the company who's getting the money. And it's not even quote unquote improving your carbon footprint, or doing anything really for the environment. Or maybe it's just kind of, like, shifting around the way it's affecting the environment. Or maybe it is an improvement, except that you're fucking over farmers in some other country mm-hmm. where you're getting the food from. So, like, these kind of individualistic things that are, like, supposed to be, like, these individualistic things are things that it's easy to hang an identity on, and like marketing teams know how to now convert your concerns into an identity to market to. And you see it with everything. You see it in like the huge proliferation of Ruth Bader Ginsburg merch.
That's so weird that we've marketed a person's life, probably without their permission.
It's absolutely bizarre. Also, never mind that she's not like some fucking paragon of leftism, which obviously not everybody who's like idolizing her identifies that way. But for the ones who do, think harder.
Imagine bigger.
But so it's just like another way that this individualistic approach is dangerous because it's really, when you're looking at it on that individual level and not looking at changing corporations and looking at changing yourself, corporations know how to market to that. So they are first lying to you and then taking your money.
Yeah, it's very much capitalist thinking. It's like, I have to optimize my life. And everything you just said 100% is true. Like, no matter what group you think you're part of, no matter how much it may seem to be like a counterculture or going against the system, that can be marketed to. That can be appropriated and worked back into capitalist systems.
Yeah.
No matter how, whatever it is. And what we've been orbiting around here, obviously, one example of this is like veganism.
Yeah.
Something I've been meaning to make an episode for a while. But you can think of like vegetarianism and veganism as like all else being equal, it is quote unquote better to eat vegetables than meat. If you look at the environmental impact of the meat industry as it is right now, you can have an individual lower carbon footprint if you don't eat meat. And all that is true and fine and good, but it doesn't consider two things. One of which is that we're looking at meat consumption at the systemic level right now, at the level, the industrial level at which we're producing things, the scale at which we're producing things. If I could like go to my neighbor or my local farm and get a cut of meat from like a local place where I had a relationship with the farmer and knew that the environmental impact was very small, I would eat meat too. But I'm a vegetarian because in the system right now, at the scale we're operating at right now, the methane being produced by cows' butts is so vastly huge, and the animal abuse is so vastly huge at the scale that we're producing it at, that I can't support that myself. However, the other thing to remember is the market for vegan products can go up while the market for meat products can go up. Like, the consumption of vegan food is going up every year. Every year someone calls it the year of the vegan or whatever, but the meat market is still growing as well at the same time because it's capitalism and every industry is geared towards constant growth. So even though there are more people consuming vegetarian and vegan, meat companies are still making more money. It's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
There's an excellent YouTube video on this by the YouTuber Mexi, which we can link in the description once again. But you have to think about it not just, in sort of binary terms, like eating meat is worse, eating vegetables is better. You have to think about systems that are in place and why is eating meat so devastating now, but it may not be as devastating in like a developing country or whatever, or, how are you going to tell like a Native American community member that them hunting and eating, buffalo or bison or some other animal when they're acting in ways that are respectful to the land that they live on is exactly as bad as like going to the grocery store and eating a hamburger that was shipped from a farm across the country.
Yeah, like we are part of the ecosystem. And problems arise when we fuck with it.
We are the ones that have fucked with the land.
and plenty of people ate meat for many, many years without ruining everything.
Without the global climate change. They, in
but
fact, ate meat for all of
always
human
ruins
history.
the party.
Yeah, all of human history up until like the 1800s when industrialism came to be. And we started farming animals at the scale that we are now. So
Yeah.
just merely meat isn't the problem. It's meat in this system that we live in. I would also like to very quickly call myself out just like 30 seconds ago when I assumed that Native Americans eat like buffalo or whatever. That was pretty racist. So I'm just going to be accountable right now. I apologize. I am not familiar with the food habits of Native American peoples, and that was bad. Anyway.
But
yes.
And so, and factory farming is bad in all forms. The factory farming of like soy isn't good either.
Yeah. If we are talking about forest fires, something that made headlines and something that circulated a lot in like vegan vegetarian circles, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or last year because time isn't real, but the Amazon rainforest fires that were sweeping the country of Brazil, those were actually started by, or not started, but the reason that all those forest fires could happen and happen in the way is because of the destruction brought on by people developing to make farms for beef and soy.
Yeah.
Which is an important thing to say because everyone's like, oh, meat production is the reason that forest fires happen. It's like, hold up, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Your tofu is bad too.
Capitalism is the reason for
Capitalism is the reason. So if, yeah, it's beef and soy and everything. There are good and bad farming practices everywhere.
And this isn't like our like attack on vegans.
No. Chase, I love you so much.
Vegans are so valid. But I think it's one really good example of, I think, something we've talked about where it's easy to say, I am doing this and therefore I am like doing my job to solve the problem. Like it's like a Band-Aid where you're satisfied and it may even cause personal improvement, but it's not doing as much as you may think it is for everyone else. Like I think how related to how we were talking about all of the reading people did in the wake of the resurgence of Black Lives Matter stuff to popular consciousness, like you buy a book and now you've done your duty. Go vegan and now you've done your duty. Like we want easy solutions and we also tend to check things off just like mentally in our heads. Like we did a thing, check it off. Just because that's how our brains are wired. And so it's easy to go in with a good purpose and then to just never follow through any further.
Yeah.
And a veganism that isn't making choices critically and is just being vegan. If your goal is not health goals and is environmentalism, obviously.
Yeah. You could just be vegan for health, but why are you listening to us
or
then?
for your like, or if it's like about how you feel about animals, that's one thing. But if your goal is environmentalism, that's not gonna do it.
Yeah. I still believe that in the society that we live in, that being vegetarian or vegan is objectively, like, all else being equal, good for the environment, as long as you're not, buying foods to replace meat using like a really resource-intensive production process, and you acknowledge that, white veganism is a thing, that you're not buying things from exploited workers, that you are not kind of following trends. I know that's very easy to follow, like, again, the marketing of vegan products, I know a lot of, it's like, oh, whatever, kombucha, whatever the next, quote unquote exotic thing is, that's also very much rooted in racism and colonialism.
Yeah, and you'll notice that health foods are just like, look how exotic this thing is.
Yeah.
And oftentimes if you go to like people where that like food is native, they're just like, that's a fruit. You fucking weirdos.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always like, oh, look at this thing that they do in India that must be better, right? It's like this mysticism kind of effect, and it's rooted in racism and colonialism.
Orientalism is really, really big in marketing of health foods.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if you're buying those, like if you're eating veggie burgers every single night, you're probably not helping the environment a lot. Is kind of the point it comes down to, at least in terms of those kinds of choices.
Yeah. There's this push to like synthesize fake meat to replace meat, and it's like, looking at the chemical engineering side of things, is it really that much better? Is really resource and time and energy intensive process to make a fake meat just so we can say that we're doing better by not eating a cow?
If the fake meat comes out and becomes like normally priced, we're gonna have to look at like, what does factory farming output and what does the production of this synthetic substance output? And maybe it will be significantly better. But we just don't know at this point.
Yeah.
Because we haven't been able to synthesize things on like a practical, huge scale level at a price point that's similar to beef.
Oh, that's very true. And this is all assuming that you can just walk to the grocery store and get something when people live in food deserts. Okay, that's the last thing I have. I promise.
The food deserts. Yeah.
I
mean, that just comes down to like, stop shaming people about their personal choices when personal choices aren't the thing that are going to make it or break it.
To liberate us.
But one thing I was also thinking of when you brought up this topic was how, again, like, corporations will latch on to the one thing that's in the public consciousness, and you can watch these things blow up into huge trends. The fucking straws.
Straws,
the goddamn fucking straws, which I think we talked about.
We might have brought it up in a different
early
episode.
Parts of our podcast. But Starbucks is like, we're gonna get rid of our straws. There's so much plastic, and a big corporation stopping consumption of one plastic product in isolation is probably going to largely decrease. It's going to probably be a big drop in the bucket of like plastic usage, or at least their plastic usage as a corporation. So that's good. But then nobody thought it through, and disabled people exist.
Right.
And so again, none of these issues exist in a vacuum. So you can't just be like, but the planet, fuck disabled people. And so corporations, what did they do? We saw this huge proliferation of the production of metal straws so that everybody could buy their little metal straw and be like, I love the environment.
Yep.
And how many people bought that? And like, I'm not shaming these people, but like, how many people bought their metal straw that they now leave on their desk and never bring out with them because they forget it all the time and like haven't done anything else since then to help
to advocate for
or
change,
like promote change to promote changes to regulations or anything like that, but like just bought their straw and that's that.
Yeah. We want an easy answer to the plastic issue. A term that I learned for in researching just this episode that, and this is an issue I've cared about for a while, I just don't have a word for it, is a toxic colonialism, where we kind of dump our trash where we don't want it. We'd always dump our trash in the areas of marginalized communities, or we ship it overseas to China or Kenya. The big story of the week last week was how big oil is now lobbying the Kenyan government to change their plastic regulations so that the U.S. can dump more plastic there. Yeah. There's a great New York Times article that we could reference about that. But yeah, that's what's going on at the corporate level, and your decision to use or not use a plastic straw every now and again is not going to change what their political power is in changing what a totally other nation can do with their plastic waste.
Yeah, and one thing I'm becoming more aware of the longer our podcast runs is that it's when you have decided, okay, we have to now like look at regulations towards this goal. I think it's important that we like lay out what you want to be looking for in those regulations, and that really came to mind with a lot of the aftermath of like calls to like abolish the police and stuff, because it became very clear that people didn't necessarily know what to look at in regulation. Mm-hmm. And so it's important when we're like looking at regulation for environmental justice that does actually address corporations, that those regulations are not, you cannot pollute our country. They are, you cannot produce this pollution, which are two very different things. And the regulations that are easier to get through are the ones that you don't allow pollution within our borders, because then the companies try to sell their trash outside, and then we have helped ourselves and offloaded our issue onto other countries, which then also doesn't help the broader issue anyway. It just makes us slightly less polluted in the meantime while we wait for the world to end. You want the regulations to be about production.
Yeah.
And about what they are allowed to do on the production level.
Mm-hmm. That's very good insight. I can tell you as a chemical engineer that checks out.
Got a stamp of approval
from the chemical engineer over here. Yeah, that's very good insight. I think it's a very good action item for people to consider when they want to make actual change. That's kind of all my notes. Do you have anything else to say on this topic, Danny? I wish to end on a positive, so know that there is a place for you in this movement. All of these issues are intertwined, food access, environmental issues, disability justice, all of them are intersecting, but that doesn't mean they're impossible to solve. And you could make decisions and you could get politically involved and try to fight it.
And if you want any of the resources that we talked about in this episode, all our resources are linked on our website, which is the rule63podcast.com. They also includes links to all of our social media, and you can follow us on Spotify or iTunes, and you can rate us on iTunes. Mm-hmm. And that's we have a Patreon.
We also have a Patreon. right after this episode, we're going to be recording a bonus episode on maybe the same, maybe a different topic. I don't know. You'll have to pay us to find out.
Come find out.
You have to come find out. But if you would like to throw us a little bit of money, if you really liked this episode, you can share this episode with someone that you know, so you can get them to listen to us too. Or B, if you really liked what you listened to today, you can give us some money on Patreon and get access to bonus content and monthly FAQ streams where you can talk to us personally. Give us your hot take.
We love them.
We love those hot, spicy takes. That is all for this episode of Rule 63. We hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.